4 in Cairo. It's now time for World of Info. Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. Today's Amr Mabrouk Najla and we're with you until 5 o'clock, so stay with us. And today we have our guest, we have the pleasure to have our guest, Ambassador Laurent de Boeck, Chief of Mission to the at the International Organization for Migration, IOM, in Egypt.
It's a great pleasure and honor to have with us, thank God for the second time, His Excellency Mr. Laurent de Boeck, the Chief of Mission of the IOM in Egypt, a man who comes with a great experience and great empathy. We're not going to call it sympathy, we'll definitely call it empathy for the impoverished, for the poor, wherever this place are their place in the world. He came to this world armed with a double bachelor degree in economics from Holland and politics from Brussels, and an MA in international diplomacy from Belgium. Worked and made an NGO for helping people when he was a student, and worked for a very short period in private sector, and found his way to the IOM, which is the International Organization of Migration. And during his service, I think he has what we can call real decorations of the goodwill to help people in places and times of trouble. He had his tenure in Yemen, in Congo, in Rwanda during the genocide, in Indonesia, in Haiti, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Madagascar, and Bosnia-Herzegovina, Liberia, Senegal, in all these places helping people and giving hope to the people who have been displaced, the people who have been subjected to natural disasters like in Haiti, or people who have been subjected to coup and civil war. All these places and all these times, and now he is stationed in a peaceful country for a change in Egypt, but yet he is extending arms of help to the migrants who pass by Egypt on their way for their final state of migration. Mr. Laurent de Boeck, thank you very much for coming. It's a great honor to have you with us in this program, and we have a lot of things to talk about since last we've seen you in 2019, where things were more peaceful. There was no COVID, there was no social distancing, and people were close to each other. And we have to talk about the International Organization for Migration.
Thank you very much, Amr. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you, Najla, for welcoming us. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be at this radio. I think it's more than a year ago you invited me. A lot of the world has changed, unfortunately, since then. And we have to, if the world has changed, we have also to change ourselves in this new normality, and the way we operate have to be adapted or to be reinforced if, as you mentioned, our objective is to serve those most vulnerable. We have seen, unfortunately, that those changes hit a lot of people worldwide.
The International Organization for Migration is an intergovernmental organization that provides service and advice concerning migration to governments and migrants, including internally displaced persons, refugees, and migrant workers. This is a very wide humanitarian scope. And could you give us an idea how this organization started? Because I know it started after World War II, because in that time there were millions of displaced people.
No, exactly. Indeed, it started, or it was created in 1951. In 1951, there was a series of states, European states mainly, as well as United States, in the process of reconstructing Europe after the Second World War, who look at how they can use people as an agent for development and reconstruction. But they realized also that a lot of people in Europe were displaced and couldn't return back to their place of origin. So they bring together a series of states, governments, willing to look at how they could take people and bring them to reinforce their human resource capacities. And Latin American countries were interested, for example, to take Europeans, displaced population, to fill in gaps in their know-how and expertise, as well as countries like United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, those immigration traditional countries. So the organization was set up in 1951 to be very operational. And we remain that organization. At least the core function is to really help people to identify opportunities, legal means to travel from a country to another and contribute to the development of their host society or keeping a link with their home country.
Yes. So it started as a separate organization. It was not belonging to the United Nations organization as an organization, and later on it changed its will and becoming part of the United Nations. What made this transfer necessary?
Well, I think the organization first was focused on Europe and some on the European population, but very quickly those states realized that it cannot be exclusively focused on Europe. There were other crises in the world than Europe, so which made the organization added value to help people in other continents. So it extended to Asia, to Africa, and so the scope, the geographical scope extended, so to become more and more important for operating, for defending the rights of those displaced population, or finding alternative and durable solution for them. So we saw also the name of the organization changing with the years. We changed 4 times our name to actually reflect the scope and the amplitude of the work. It started with a European focused organization, and the European word of the name was dropped to move into a more global organization. But at the same time, we remain operational for all those years. But in the 90s, we realized that it's important also to have more policies regarding migration, or words like migration governance came on the political agenda, but still with a very high profile of law enforcement, so more sovereignty of states and less people focused. So, but the migration was really the focus of Ministry of Interior, I would say, Ministry of Justice. But debate started to see how migrants can contribute to the development of countries, with the expatriates' integration of people, the fight against discrimination, the remittances, or the money that the people transfer, they are integrated in a country but continue linking with the countries of origin. So we saw a lot of debate starting on population growth. Our countries can actually look at migrants as for compensating the aging population. And little by little there were international conferences touching the subjects in 90s, and in 2000, the 2000 years, more and more debates at the international level on how to change and move into a migration and development nexus, and a series of different discussions leading to those aspects. By bringing it in more open society on discussing those issues, it increases well the migration subject insertion into the political agenda. And by making it the political agenda, the need for member states and the acceptance of member states to have it discussed differently, not the exclusive focus of one law enforcement approach, which brought little by little the subject at the level of the United Nations General Assembly. Discussions which have been done at the global forum, where discussions occurred on the link between migration and development. So a series of discussion, state-led discussion, not necessarily by the United Nations, but state-led discussion bringing the importance of considering migration through its whole large spectrum, not only through one lens of control. And so that, to make it short, because it took some years, bring member states at the United Nations to consider the organization as a member of the United Nations family. The main change, because we were operating as an intergovernmental organization already with a very large number of member states, but the main change is particularly the development agenda. And so, which is for us, since the very beginning, actually, of 1951, a very important point of our work, but it has been recognized by the General Assembly and all United Nations that migration and migrants then are actors of development. And they cannot be seen as a danger or as exclusively people of high vulnerability. They are positive contributors to the development of societies. And to me, joining the United Nations is this recognition. And that's very important that states have agreed to actually consider an organization which can propose positive alternatives focused on people, migrants, to contribute to the development of a society.
So it's now increasing its scope, broadening its scope, and having more problems to deal with and to try to solve. So from its roots as an operational logistic agency, it has broadened its scope to become the leading international agency working with governments and civil society to advance the understanding of migration issues, encourage social and economic development through migration, and uphold the human dignity and well-being of migrants. But how far was it successful in that? I know that you have your own frustrations always because you want to give more, and sometimes there are a lot of things that are hindering these targets.
Yeah, no, for some years, I think since 2015, we have worked on a framework, what we call a migration governance framework. And we have called the member states to be inclusive, so being like all of the government approach, making sure that all the ministerial departments do contribute to a policy looking at migrants and migration. So indeed, we were actually calling for ensuring that there is an appropriate coordination between all departments, ministerial departments, at country level and regional level and global level. And it means indeed a lot of coordination, a lot of discussions and dialogue with those. But I think it evolved since 2015 to today to quite very positively. At the same time that we reached the United Nations, there was the Global Compact on Orderly Migration, which came out, which is also showing the need for cooperation between a large series of actors. But when you say there are two benefits, well, there are one benefit and evident benefit and one complication of working with more actors. First, indeed, you reach out more people and you can make your impact more sustainable because they own the process. So you consult everybody and you make sure that any policy or program is integrated into their approach. So it's positive in the long term. But coordinating actors is also making difficulties because we have to actively listening to all of them and take into consideration all our in the approach. So it makes it complex. But we focus on people, meaning a society. Our people may live together, so we have to actually consider all aspects of life of a human being when we talk about migrants. And that person is integrating into a community, and we have to consider that community as well. In Egypt, in particular, that we see the migrants are integrated. There is no camp in the country. They are all integrated into the society. But it means looking at all aspects of the society for facilitating and ensuring that there is a positive contribution of migrants and vice versa, the host community to the migrants. So it requires us to work with a very large number of partners in the country.
Egypt has a very distinguished state in this. I mean, all countries, even the neighboring countries, have camps for refugees. Egypt does not.
Absolutely.
And this gives Egypt a step ahead. I mean, Egypt has been always hospitable. Egypt has been always very kind, refusing this stigma of discrimination by saying you are an immigrant or you're a refugee, you're going to be put in a camp. And putting in a camp is really devastating on the psychological feelings of these migrants. Tell us about how was that possible in a country like Egypt, which is a developing nation. It's not definitely economically very as European countries or other foreign countries or other Western countries. How was that possible?
I think it's based on ancestral culture of hospitality. I understand, and I see. To me, you mentioned I've lived in various countries in my life, and it's the country where I saw the highest care for people. The level of care that people pay to the others is extremely important. Egyptians are really willing to make sure that those coming from outside do like the country. So sometimes I find it even too much that they will give preferences to people from outside than their own nationals to make sure that they feel comfortable and they feel at home. But I think it's the basis of the culture, which is very strong to me, that they really want everyone to feel at home and they care for them. So they will. The Egyptians will welcome the migrants and share their meals, share their house. They will tolerate a certain situation if they can't pay their rent, which we don't find in other culture. It's a very strong cultural feature of Egyptians to me, which makes it a very interesting country to watch as a let's say professional on migration, because indeed. In a lot of other countries, we feel a very strong and high discrimination, xenophobia, which we don't feel here. It exists. We cannot say that there is no, let's say, discrimination. There are certainly individuals who may not actually accept all foreigners, but generally speaking, I think it's individual situation. Generally speaking, there is a very high willingness to integrate people, and migrants are mentioning the fact that they really feel at home in Egypt.
So it's now we're talking about a different world. I mean, this is the work of IOM before the COVID, and we have to talk about since what happened in 2020. There is great challenge globally, and definitely the IOM is facing it globally, and we have to talk about it globally and in Egypt. So tell us first about how IOM is faring with the COVID across the world.
Well, the COVID has a huge impact on an organization who is dealing with mobility, because basically at the end of the day, the organization is aimed at facilitating the movements of people freely, legally, among countries, and exchanging people and valuing people and how they can contribute to a society. So if you start by stopping any movement between any country, you would touch actually the core activity of an organization. And particularly you will increase the organization concerns of taking care of those people who become stranded. So we were planning, for example, for 2020, a very important number worldwide of movements. You know, we are supporting refugees to be resettled in other countries where they have been accepted. The process of resettlement may take years to be ready, and so it comes to us where we prepare them to move, we train them, we provide cultural orientation, we prepare their fit to travel, so all the health conditions that they can integrate. It takes time, and suddenly all these people worldwide who have prepared for sometimes years or waited for years to move are stranded, stopped, and we have to wait without knowing exactly when it will resume. So there is only on that group of people where we have a role and a responsibility worldwide. We had to deal with much more psychosocial effect on the decision or the incapacity to move, and a huge difficulty of adapting our programs to actually mention the fact that 1 year, 2 years preparation are basically cancelled, put on hold, without the capacity to say when it will start again and whether it will start again, because we didn't have such information.
And this is the status quo all over now the world.
And now it resumed, luckily. So it stopped in March. It resumed slowly. Some countries are agreeing on taking the most vulnerable people. So we see new movements, but it's slow. But then you have emergence of new cases, of situation of people who were working. So we are also dealing with all labor migrants or migrant workers. So they were in a country with a certain contract, and suddenly, because of the lockdown and the economic impact of the lockdown worldwide, we see people not able to pay salaries anymore. So you have then a series of new vulnerable migrants who were under a good condition, good working condition with a salary, losing their job without the capacity then to move. So you have stranded people losing their economic means and not able to go anywhere. So they become vulnerable, not capable to pay anything anymore, and so they become they fall under the responsibility of the organization, with the embassies to some extent, but also some embassies relying on us to support them. So it's a new category. We are taking care of those workers, but they may actually be even having contracts falling in vulnerability quickly. It's okay for 1 month, 2 months, but the same, they may have lost their job forever, because actually the companies which were hiring them had to privilege the nationals, so cease to exist. So then you have those migrants who were already in vulnerability situation because they didn't have a job. They were looking at opportunities. They were working in the informal market, and in like the case in Egypt, but they were hit by this lockdown and the socio-economic impact of the pandemic the same way the Egyptians were. So they were all also not capable to pay anything anymore, not having activities. There was a real slowdown of activities. And so where there was, for example, a tolerance of delays in payment of rent, that couldn't occur anymore. Everybody needed funds, needed money, because Egyptians were also looking at ways to compensate the loss. So we have seen then new vulnerability coming out, like people evicted and sleeping in streets. And with that, the difficulty then to protect the children and so. So we see a new, let's say, new series of vulnerabilities which were added to the fact that they were already vulnerable. So a multi-vulnerability of some category of migrants. So and that's in Egypt and worldwide. And in every situation we have seen much more complex situation that face migrants. I think it's normal that the government or private sector will privilege nationals of their country if they face economic turmoil. So they will keep their nationals and thank the foreign workers and say, sorry, but we have to keep our nationals. And even some actually had to close business, so they had to unfortunately decide to terminate both. But so we have people stranded in every part of the world. If the ILO has estimated the number of loss of jobs in hundreds of millions in the world. Yes. And all these people may fall under the organization. At a time when, so we would need much more fund and support to help governments worldwide to actually respond to the health situation with the health centers, the provision of services, of medicines, of protective equipment, but at a time as well where all governments, even those who are funding support, are facing issues. European countries who are funding our operations are not necessarily able to continue doing so because they have to invest in their own country. Yes. For actually coping with the situation they face. So there is a huge change that an organization like ours, who is actually relying on funds from member states, which is facing today of not a reluctance, but a questioning on what investment is capable to be done today by those donor countries, because they have to also readdress their priorities, considering the situation they face at home.
Wow. That's a tough situation. I can't envy you for your job.
No, we are doing well so far, but it's indeed a stressful situation because you have more people to help with less means, and you have to be inventive in finding solutions and avenues on how to do so. And partnership for me is an ideal solution, in working with other institutions who have find ways to actually do it. And in Egypt, I really enjoy working, for example, with the Egyptian Red Crescent, because they are very efficient and they really find ways to mobilize community leaders among the Egyptians to actually respond to situation, to train them to activate a system. And that's the only way to do, actually. We cannot continue working the same way. We have to rely on every actor. And there is a huge mobilization, and that's the positive aspect. I would say to me, COVID is, if you see it from far, you can have it a very negative picture and black picture, but it has also created huge solidarity between people. They find ways to continue being together in a way or another, but also a very high consideration of the most vulnerable, and people continuing or really considering those in need, and that's the beauty of also something coming from outside imposing us to actually cut relationship and come out the need to remain a social being. That we can impose social distancing, but at the end I think we are social people. Human beings cannot live separated and behind a screen. And we saw this solidarity coming back, and people, I admire the health professionals who are doing this job despite the situation. Some were dying. I think now we hear less and less, but they were continuing. Some I've seen some cases of divorce of the wife of a doctor, because she was scared of her husband, who didn't understand him, that he was going to serve those people while he could put his family in danger. But those things are showing that it's the beauty of human being. They continue, they believe in life, and they will go and fight, not for them, but for others, and go to the people. And that's, I think, a beauty of what COVID has shown, is that humans remain human.
Yes, I think it's time to reflect on all that and take a break with His Excellency Ambassador Laurent de Boeck, Chief of Mission at the International Organization for Migration in Egypt.
Still on air with His Excellency Ambassador Laurent de Boeck, the Chief of Mission of the IOM here in Cairo. And before the break, we talked about the role of the Egyptian Red Crescent, and we just gave a mention of how always President Sisi is always talking about how Egypt is unique among a lot of countries by not making camps for immigrants and by not making any places for refugees, and saying that you are not welcome here. So the Red Crescent is doing a marvelous job. Tell us some elaboration about that, please.
Yeah, I think it. It has a beautiful mandate of helping people actually on the territory, and what I appreciate particularly is that they don't differentiate the nationality. So they very quickly discuss with us on the fact that everybody should have access to education, everybody should have access to health services, to protection. They should be able to call and receive appropriate service, and so. I've seen developed in the Egyptian Red Crescent services which don't differentiate people. But not to differentiate people and migrants, for example, you need to have the capacity to respond in their own language, because there are some people who come here and they do not speak Arabic. So it's incredible to see, actually. And I recently visited again the Egyptian Red Crescent headquarters. The investment they did in recruiting people who talk all the language of those who are living in Egypt, to be sure that they can provide such a service to anyone. So you have services you can call and talk any language of your origin, and you will find a person responding to you and telling you whether they can help you directly or who can support you. And I find it beautiful to see
like
that.
A hotline, or they go
hotline. They have hotline, they have emergency hotline. They will direct you to the appropriate service. They just developed recently a mental health service or psychosocial support. You have people who provide guidance, they are psychologists, to those who suffer of any type of trauma. online, and they try to do it online because they don't want to. With the COVID in particular, they adapted their ways. They would have referred people to an hospital, but today it's not necessarily the situation which prevails, because hospitals are maybe overwhelmed, and it's a place where you may actually be confronted with the COVID itself. So they privilege advice online, but they do it in various languages, and that's what I appreciate in being extremely practical and turn to people of any type, giving this service to everybody. Then they say we cannot only do it for Cairo, so they have trained people in all the governorates, and they train them online now with people. They have called to reinforce their workforce of volunteers. Egyptian youth can volunteer, or youth or not youth, young, but anyone can volunteer to support the Red Crescent, and they ensure that it's done in all the governorates in the country. The same system. So to me, it's a very efficient, people-centered organization. It's really a pleasure to actually have. We have signed an agreement with them to collaborate, and it's really a pleasure to work with them. They look at every aspect. They are preparing plans for even natural disasters, their response. They are really ahead. They have a good vision of what humanitarian organization should be. And they are, to me, an extremely efficient partner in the country.
The Egyptian Red Crescent, real respectable organization, and I think it's definitely has done a lot of work. But to have this other view of it coming from you is really very touchy, to know how these people are doing. And a lot of them, I know for sure, they have a very big force of volunteers joining in this organization. Not all of them are paid, and even those who are paid are maybe paid nominal figures, and yet they are still important and caring for that.
I think it reflects on what I said.
Yes, definitely. So I think we'll have a break. We have something on air.
We'll have to go for a transmission for President Sisi's words.
History of diplomatic ties being founded between Egypt and Hungary, and all channels of communications have been there, and the prime ministers, the excellencies, the prime ministers of both countries have been in constant contact to further reinforce and enhance these relations, with something, of course, which has always been a source of pride for both our countries. We have discussed with His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary.
So we'll get back, until the
transmission comes on. Yes. So we were talking about the role of the Red Crescent, and we have also to talk about the future, because we are looking forward for the COVID to disappear. And sometimes people are always saying, for example, Dr. Fauci from the United States is always saying we have to live with it for years to come. How you are faring with the presence of all this number of migrants in transition, with the social distancing, and how your workers are performing under stressful conditions like this?
No, I think it's right that we are now in what we call a new normality, and the new normality is to live with a pandemic, and I can even worse on it is the fact that we have today one of it, the COVID, but nothing prevents us to have another. So we have to talk about the possibility to actually cope with a series of pandemics in the future, and we have to be realistic at the same time. Indeed, it's not possible to, and we have seen that in the world, to ask people to have such a distance or to stop working, because not everyone can afford actually living on any money that they may have kept in the past. They must actually work every day, and for the working every day they have to go outside and meet people, and some are living in crowded areas, so it's not feasible what is requested for a population. So I think we cannot privilege social distancing which is only feasible for a certain privileged category of population. We have really to look at how the people living in dense populated areas, generally the poorest, have to go through and afford them access to proper advice, proper health, public health, and information. So it's important to go to them, because they are the main priority of those people, being in this case of Egyptians and migrants in those dense population areas, is to survive. And they cannot afford to stay home, not to work for a few days. They must go. So the new reality is certainly to live with a pandemic, with COVID, but to actually educate people to have the right reaction.
So you're investing in this education, in how to maintain healthy measures and trying to avoid extensive contact and things like that?
We have reached out 500,000 people now with education on basic protecting measures to be taken. We repeat it regularly, and that's only IOM doing, but a lot of other organizations doing the same. We provided equipment itself, and we work with institutions to actually pass the message and provide the equipment. We have worked with hospitals, because although we work for migrants, we do not want to discriminate them positively. So if we work in migrants dense area like in Giza, we will help the institution of Giza who are what we called migrant friendly. We cannot just go to the migrants themselves. So we will help the institution who welcome the migrants. Then they will have an increased capacity to help the Egyptians and the migrants. Because otherwise we would create a social tension. If we come and we give, because you are a migrant, a better service, we will create a tension with the host community, particularly here, where the host community is so hospitable with them. So we have to thank those Egyptians who have worked with them and facilitated their life for doing so. So all our services are oriented to be provided to Egyptians and migrants. So it's a very important approach that we promote all over the country.
Well, it's definitely a very important idea in order to help and support the caregivers, and at the same time increasing broadening their scope to help more, whether these were the Egyptians or the migrants themselves. So you have been living a very stressful life.
Maybe yes.
Yes, and empathy is the name of the game. But sometimes empathy could be hard to fulfill, right? What is your reflection on that? I mean,
well, I think I guess empathy comes from my nature, or maybe my past, and what I receive as an indication from my family. The difficulty in empathy is not to forget yourself, actually, because you may work and be focused only on others, and you have a tendency to forget yourself or those who are close to you, like your own family, which was somehow my situation in some countries. But it's also kind of a vicious circle, because you help people and then you realize that it's never enough. So you always have to do more, and if you help, you can do better, and so your empathy is actually becoming the engine of your life. So I always want to think positively, but understanding that the situation is not necessarily positive. So I want to believe that there is a solution for everything, but recognizing that some situations really need a solution, and that means that it's never enough what we are doing, because we can have saved a life or help a certain number of people, but there are always others to help, or new problems which arise, and so It's an engine, and I think we are a lot of thinking like this on the humanitarian world, of trying our best to make sure that everybody has a basic access to service, and we can sacrifice part of our life to make sure that it happens.
Mm-hmm. So I think you have a very good escape. Sometimes since we're together friends on Facebook, I always find it very interesting that you are sharing on your page beautiful proverbs and beautiful photographs. So you have two hobbies, not just one. So it comes two in one. You always put an African proverb with a matching photograph. And I always find that very amusing to read and to notice. And it's very interesting. Tell us about this hobby. How did it start?
Well, I think, yes, I started more the proverbs than the photography. The photography is more recent, but the proverbs I started like 15 years ago. In African, because I love the wisdom of Africa, actually. Because, yes, as you mentioned, I've lived in countries which were extremely complex, and I privilege actually discussing with the local population. And they always refer to this wisdom of a proverb or a dicton or what their ancestors have said. And actually I realized that in few words they could summarize my very complex thinking. And so in few words I could say something which would pass me a very positive message, which sometimes I needed. So I try to indeed refer to them. I've made research, I've bought books on proverbs, to look at what it says, where it comes from, and there are some books comparing them between continents, and we see that there are one proverb in Africa might be similar to one in Latin America, in Europe. So it's very interesting to see that actually there is a need in every culture for actually referring to a sentence which may find its opposite in another proverb, actually, but you pass a message which is very strong sometimes. You say few words which makes you thinking, and bring me some peace. It's like, because it's a proverb, to me, I take it as something ancestral. It comes from person to person for years, so it has a certain value of age, let's say, of going through the ages. And it makes me thinking of its sense and how I can apply it on a daily basis. And I search according to my mind. So if you look at my proverbs and my Facebook page, you will understand what my set of mind. Because I will put something on how I feel that day.
You always put one every day, or what?
I try.
You take weekends?
I try every day. Funny enough, I think there is once I didn't put it for 3 days, and then I received complaints from my friends,
from the followers.
So I try to have one. I may put one which reflects also the situation of an international day, like recently on the Environmental Day. So I put something on trees, and which reflects on what is going on in the world. I realize that some are maybe seen sensitively, because I put things on riots, and at the time that there are some riots in the world, so it's not appropriate. So I have to be sensitive also, and to be correct. I have to look at them, and I try now to link them with a photo. Indeed, I actually love photography since I am in Egypt, because they are very beautiful capture you can take in Egypt, and so I try, I don't succeed all the time to have a link between the two, but I'm passionate by capturing like day-to-day life picture, which I found in the street of.
You have a very artistic eye of picturing, of having photographs. I mean, I love the photographs that you include people, like, for example, vendors in the street, or a donkey, or the wheels. Or 2 days ago, you were posting a picture of a guy who's fixing wheels. So usually put these old wheels are on the street. So you had a photograph of 3 wheels in a row in the middle of nowhere, and this is very interesting. Tell us some of these proverbs. I mean, definitely few of them have lingered in your mind for some time, because you can be impressed every once in a while by one or two, but sometimes some of them stay with you forever.
Yeah,
you have examples. Tell our listeners, because we want to ease their pain after talking about a lot of refugees.
There are two at which I privilege the most, actually. The one is, it says, and I discovered it in South Africa, but it's, if you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I find it very beautiful, because indeed, alone we can run, but we will not. So we'll be fast, but we will not reach anything. It's only with others that so it speaks about solidarity and how we can be just in community, that we will reach something. So that I like very much in my work, actually, because I apply it always in I believe strongly in partnership to reach objectives, durable objectives. And the other one, which is maybe more fun, and I repeat it myself when we face a situation which seems endless and negative, like, and we can apply it for COVID, and I find it very fun. But it says everything has an end, but the banana, she has two.
But the banana?
She has two ends. On both sides.
Yes.
And I like it because it makes me smiling, and indeed we can be in big issues, big problems, and sometimes we don't see the end of them. I repeat it to myself, no, everything has an end. So every issue and every problem has an end. So let's be positive and continue.
Always light in the end of the tunnel.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's one which I privilege, because it makes me smiling. But there are a lot of different proverbs that I use. Sometimes when I'm in meetings with my colleagues, I try to pass them a proverb which has more than a long sentence. So I would tell them something according to the situation, which will pass them the right message to go on and continue. So no, I like it very much, this wisdom.
Ahmed Basha Taimur has written the الأمثال العامية, or the famous Egyptian dialect proverbs, and it's like almost like a dictionary. And I find it very interesting to read this book. I always refer to it, and he's putting them alphabetically, and he did this in the early 20th century, and he put them alphabetically and with an explanation to every proverb. And this is like an extreme dedication to dedicate a part and times of your life to make such a dictionary, which is full of beautiful proverbs, and then you find yourself saying, "Wow, this is so fitting." The wisdom of a country like Egypt that goes far back in centuries, and how they are dealing with all the situations, how they are dealing with the invaders, how they are dealing with their governors, how they are dealing with their compatriots, with their families, with their foreigners. All this, I think it's a lot of wisdom. So maybe after you have your own copy, you'll start putting Egyptian proverbs.
I look for them, actually. Yes. Now, to me, a proverb is what I would call a popular philosophy.
Yes,
it's a people philosophy.
Yes, definitely.
So it brings you to thinking and reflecting differently to situations. And I think it's very necessary that actually we reflect.
Besides doing, since we are coming to an end of our talk today, besides doing this meditation with the proverbs, how do you find other escape hatch? Because every day you are facing a lot of people in trouble, and we talked about the empathy and how to make empathy evolve into a better situation, solving the problems. But also the proverbs helps you also. What else do you find a good chance for meditation?
Doing sports might be the best, but generally sports are something which you would play alone, or if you play, you are in a competition. So it's different. I would privilege meeting friends, having social interaction and exchange with people. But I like, and that's what helps me also to make photos, is walking in the streets, just watching people and observing how people live, which makes me very relaxed. I can stay and watch people for hours, just crossing the street, and how a society is organized. To me, it's beautiful, because we see, I admire the way people are actually coping with every situation.
And you like to go to local vendors for good food, right?
Absolutely.
You were eating kosher the other day, and you looked very happy, right?
Indeed.
So I think really you have to promise us to come back again to our program.
It's a pleasure.
To talk more with more informative ideas about the IOM, and definitely with good news, hopefully with the recession of the COVID. And things will get better, because everything has to come to an end, and usually it's a good ending, right?
It's a good ending, yeah.
Okay, by this we come to the end of Word of Info with His Excellency Ambassador Laurent de Boeck, Chief of Mission in Egypt and the International Organization for Migration, Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. Dua Muhammad was at the controls. I'm Najla NAGIB. See you next Thursday, same time, same station, FM 95.4.